Good morning, live from AmFest, Phoenix, Arizona, with Turning Point USA. It's Chris Hand, 9:04. It only took me 5 days to start getting the time right. I'll probably screw it up later.
Yeah, don't speak too soon.
I don't want to count chickens right before they hatch. But I kind of know the time now. It's not 9:04. I hope you guys are having a fantastic morning. We had a great day yesterday at AmFest. Some great speakers were here, including Tucker Carlson, watching Timcast IRL live with Tucker Carlson and James O'Keefe. If you missed any of those, they're all on YouTube. In fact, the conversation last night got so right up to the line and looking over that YouTube gave Turning Point USA a strike. So if you missed the conversation, I'm going to have audio from it. But before we get into that, the biggest story that I think is happening right now in Tennessee is the fact that Tennessee is suing BlackRock in its first of its kind ESG lawsuit. This is pretty cool. Our Attorney General says he wants to make certain that corporations, no matter the size, treat Tennessee consumers fairly and honestly, and I think this is a big, big win. So Fox Business had the story. They say the state of Tennessee is suing BlackRock, the world's largest financial asset manager, in its first-of-its-kind lawsuit alleging the firm has harmed consumers through its environmental commitments and climate strategy. Weird. According to the lawsuit filed in state court Monday and first obtained by Fox Business, BlackRock has articulated two inconsistent positions. One, prioritizing financial returns, and the other, prioritizing investment policies to combat climate change. While BlackRock has faced, big opposition from this over its so-called ESG scores, the environmental, social, and governance strategy, Tennessee's action yesterday is the first legal challenge to accuse BlackRock of violating consumer protection laws, and I think that this is a big, big story. BlackRock is one of these massive companies that own everything, along with Vanguard, and, these guys are trying to control what companies are doing, and it's hurting investments. Now, Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti told Fox Business in a statement, "We allege that BlackRock's inconsistent statements about its investment strategies deprived consumers of the ability to make an informed choice." He said, "Some public statements show a company that focuses exclusively on return on investment. Others show a company that gives special consideration to environmental factors. And ultimately, he wants to make certain that corporations, no matter their size, treat Tennessee consumers fairly and honestly." Now, over the last 2 years, Republican state attorney generals, and state financial officers have been criticizing BlackRock. And BlackRock, again, one of the largest companies in the world, they manage a $9.1 trillion, with a T, trillion, worldwide over its ESG policies, which officials are saying amount to the firm using its financial power to force companies into adopting certain policies, whether that be the DEI, whether that be the climate change. That's what people are saying is happening. Now, critics have specifically argued that ESG-focused asset managers like BlackRock are sidestepping their legally mandated fiduciary duty to consider the well-being of clients whose money they manage. Because if they promote climate policies leading to worse financial performance, then it hurts the clients. And when you look at high profitable industries like fossil fuels, this is a big deal. And it's a big deal that we're suing them in Tennessee. Now, there's a quote here. BlackRock has admitted that promoting ESG aims, like companies radically reducing their carbon output, can conflict with its fund's financial performance. So BlackRock knows that these policies hurt the return on investment. That's what the lawsuit states. And they say it's thus only fair that consumers know if the hard-earned funds they invest will be leveraged to BlackRock's ESG ends rather than to maximizing financial returns. I mean, think about it. If you're investing money, do you want it going to, radical climate change agendas and have that hurt your investment? If you're investing in fossil fuels, do you want to do it with a company like BlackRock who is aiming to reduce carbon output and thus hurting your investments? Of course not. And that's why it's so good that Tennessee is now suing them. Now, in the lawsuit, it also says, yet for years, BlackRock has misled consumers about the scope and effects of its widespread ESG activity. And it adds BlackRock's conduct concerning the marketing or sale of its investment products and service constitutes deceptive acts and practices under the Tennessee Consumer Protection Act. The lawsuit also notes that BlackRock in recent years has joined activist organizations, namely the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, Climate Action 100, both which require member companies and groups to make certain climate commitments. Climate commitments, which you and I know is an absolute joke. And if it's hurting your investments, this is not good for Tennesseans. The Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative states on its own website, that it aims to galvanize asset management industry to commit to a goal of net zero emissions in order to mitigate financial risk and maximize long-term value of assets. And Climate Action 100 identifies itself as an investor-led initiative to ensure the world's largest corporate greenhouse gas emitters take necessary action on climate change. Now, BlackRock is rejecting the Attorney General's claims, saying that they're going to contest any accusations that BlackRock has violated Tennessee consumer protection laws. But I think when you look at what they tell you about their own business practices, what they say themselves about ESG, this is an uphill battle for them. And that's all according to a BlackRock spokesperson. They say, contrary to the Attorney General's claims, BlackRock fully and accurately discloses their investment practices and their approach to proxy voting. They also say, on behalf of our clients, BlackRock has invested approximately $40 billion in Tennessee, and they're helping more than 600,000 hardworking Tennesseans retire with dignity. And they say they're proud of their contribution and committed to the future in Tennessee. So who do you believe? I'm going with Skermetti on this one. In addition, the lawsuit also highlights that BlackRock CEO Larry Fink has publicly stated that his firm asks companies its holds and investments to set greenhouse gas reduction targets, which it polices through voting and engagement. Larry Fink tried to walk those comments back earlier this year after multiple states moved to pull billions of dollars in state pensions managed by BlackRock, namely, I think it was Oklahoma in May. Fink said during an event in June that he was ashamed of being part of this conversation. Well, luckily, we have an Attorney General who's doing something about it, and Attorney General Skermetti is on record saying, he's protecting consumers and calling out deception from asset management firms turned tyrants like BlackRock and CEO Larry Fink, who are attempting to foist a political agenda on the people of Tennessee and all Americans. Now, it brings me back to the speech over the weekend at AmFest with Vivek Ramaswamy, where, he says we have to look out for not just governments but corporations. And I think one of these corporations that we have to look out for is a BlackRock, who, with what they manage, can really change the policy in our state and in our country. So I think it's an amazing thing that they're taking action in Tennessee. And, of course, Tennessee is taking action with this first-of-its-kind lawsuit because that's what we do in Tennessee. And again, I can't stress enough how monumental this is. Larry Fink, this is from the Tennessee, Larry Fink has been foregoing his fiduciary duty by taking consumers' money and using it for leftist causes such as ESG and arbitrary net zero goals for far too long. This lawsuit is taking the fight directly to Fink and BlackRock to let them know these policies will not be tolerated. I applaud his commitment in protecting Tennesseans, and Consumers Research will continue to support actions that push back on ESG policies. I think this is fascinating, and I cannot wait to see where it goes. Now, will we win the lawsuit? Will the state of Tennessee win? I mean, I think it's important to point out again, BlackRock manages $9.1 trillion. They're going to be able to afford the best lawyers. But I think on its merit, they can't really say much when it comes to the comments they've already made about ESG scores and about supporting leftist woke causes with your investment money. They're all on record for that. So it's going to be an uphill battle, but, never count out somebody that has $9.1 trillion in their back pocket. This is, to me, this is going to be one of the biggest stories as we close out the year and as we start 2024. And I can't wait to see where it goes. And I hope we see more of this from more states. Maybe they should look into trying to turn this somehow into a class action where we can get multiple states involved, because an asset firm like this should not be dictating policy when it comes to, these equity, social governance, and climate change causes with your investment money. So I'm excited about this, and I wanted to start the show with this because I think that this is the biggest news in Tennessee. Now, as we continue, we have a big show for you today. We are live at AmFest in Phoenix. It is the last day for Turning Point USA's AmFest 2023. It has been very, very cool. Last night, you remember Bass Jaden? Did I tell you I met Bass Jaden, the backpack kid?
Yes.
So last night, Tucker Carlson gave his speech, and he's doing a Q&A session. And Bass Jaden asks Tucker if he would be VP. And Tucker kind of dodges the question. Matt Gaetz was on stage over the weekend saying he wants Tucker for VP. Tucker dodges the question from Jaden. And I kind of was like, doesn't sound like he's going to do it. But then last night during the Timcast IRL, which was live at AmFest 2023, you had Tim Pool and Charlie Kirk asking Tucker, like in this, at the same table, sitting at the same table, will you take the VP nomination? And he didn't say no. He dodged the question. He said, well, it's like the weather. I can't control it. That was his answer. I think that there's definitely a possibility that Tucker could be VP at this point. Charlie Kirk looks right at Tucker Carlson and says, you're my choice, 100%. Tim Pool looks at Tucker Carlson and says, yeah, we want you. And the crowd cheers. The crowd absolutely loved it. But there was another point where Tucker says he wouldn't support a Trump ticket if Nikki Haley was the VP. And it got me thinking, and I said, this is one of the things that I really forgave in the first Trump administration, hiring the old guard Republicans, namely the John Boltons and stuff like that. I always felt that Trump was trying to smooth things over with the Republican Party that he dismantled in the primaries. And so he brought in some of the guys that I don't think he would bring in a second term. And I didn't like it, but I understood it, and it was forgiving. I don't know if you would support a Nikki Haley VP, a Trump-Haley ticket. That, to me, would feel like I need to take a shower. And I wonder what you guys think. And I would love to open up the phone lines to this as well, or the super text line. Would you support a Trump-Haley ticket? 615-737-9986. Because I think that's an interesting question. Because we all feel a type of way about Nikki Haley. Tucker roasted Nikki Haley last night. And, Mac, if you can get Tucker AmFest 1 ready, one of the things that Tucker said was when he was speaking last night is he knew he was in the right place because everyone here hates Nikki Haley. And then he proceeded to roast her viciously. Clip 1, Mac.
So I am not a person who looks for apocalypse on the horizon. I always think it's going to be 74 and sunny, just my nature and my upbringing. Oh, 74 and sunny. You're from Newport Beach. Okay, I got it. Anyway, but the evidence unmistakably shows an acceleration in whatever this dark force is in this country, whose only impulse is to destroy. Not to improve or create, but to destroy. And it's all around us. And the only way to stop it is with that moral strength I described. Guns won't stop it. They have more than we do. That's just true. And they're happy to use them. They're happy to use them. And when I hear Senator Dick Durbin, who might be the most evil member of the Senate, and it's quite a tight race for that title, when I hear Senator Dick Durbin say, maybe we should take some of the tens of millions of foreigners who've arrived, all of whom seem to be about 23 and in great shape, and hand them automatic weapons in our military and give them badges and guns in our police departments, I'm wondering, what exactly is that? Oh, you're assembling an army against your own people. That's what you're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. And you know that that's what they're doing. So, whatever, there are hard times ahead. And you can't beat them with force of arms. You can only beat them with the truth, by showing up and standing immobile in the face of their lies and not fearing them. And there's far too little of this going on.
Oh, that was the wrong clip. Then that's my mistake. Editing in a hotel room gets a little tough. But Tucker basically said, Nikki Haley and the crowd boos. And he goes, well, this is how I know I'm in the right place, because people here hate Nikki Haley. Now I'm getting texts in on if you would support a Trump-Haley ticket, and it seems like a mixed bag. 8602 says, as long as it's Trump, I'll take it. 9675 says, I don't trust Tricky Nikki. 6766, no Trump-Haley. She's a bigger traitor than Pence, and it won't take 4 years to figure out. 3756, screw Nikki. She was a garbage governor and is a backstabbing hypocrite. Whew. 3653 just said no in all caps.
Straight to the point.
No, all caps, exclamation point. I love it. Bill texted, he said, Trump and Nikki Haley to the swampy. It's like a Reagan-Bush ticket. Learn from the mistakes of the past. 0550 said, of course I would vote for Trump-Haley. These pundits speaking in absolutes is not helpful. I don't know if I could support that ticket. Nikki Haley to me seems like the fakest politician running right now, and I'm not with it. I'm just not. But I want to know what you think. 615-737-9986. We got more coming from Turning Point USA's AmFest. It's the last day as we broadcast live in Phoenix, Arizona. It's 9:21 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hey, it's Chris Hand from my friends at USS United Structural Systems. They have been in Middle Tennessee doing their thing since 1994, and they have 25,000 satisfied customers that will vouch for them. Well, what do these guys do? Crawl space encapsulation, basement wall realignment. They'll fix your sinkholes. They'll fix your foundation. Anything that's going on with your house, these guys can talk to you about it, whether it's structural repair, concrete lifting, basement, and crawl space waterproofing. You need to talk to the guys at USS. Now, it's one of those industries, and they told me themselves, you don't know you need USS until you know you need USS. So look around your house. Are you seeing cracks in your foundation? Have you noticed water in your crawl space, wet basement walls, maybe cracks in your basement floors? Well, that's your house trying to tell you something. And the guys at United Structural System, they'll be able to diagnose exactly what's going on. So if you have any of those issues, if you haven't been down your crawl space in a while, I suggest you poke your head down there and see if you have any of those issues. Give USS a call today, 615-488-7855, 615-488-7855, or online, USSTN.com.
I got some road work in the way. Going to be 24 westbound off-ramp to Harding Place. The off-ramp right lane is blocked. And Tennessee taking on the world's largest financial asset company, alleging it's misleading investors to push a political agenda rather than returns. These stories and more at 9:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I knew I was in the right place because I've spoken. In fact, I speak here every year because I really enjoy it and I love Charlie. But so there's never a question of whether I was in the right place. But when I heard Tulsi Gabbard mention the phrase Nikki Haley, and people booed, I was like, oh yeah, we're in the right. But then it raised actually a philosophical question for me, which is, should you put air quotes around Nikki Haley? Because otherwise you're just assuming this is a real person and not just a hologram put out there by Ken Griffin in the billionaire class to torment you. And I do think that's like an open question. Is Nikki Haley real? And actually, no, I mean, I don't know. Like, what, do I look like a biologist or a theologian? I don't know. What is real?
What is real? That's the question. Is Nikki Haley real, or is she a hologram put out by the billionaire elite donor class? You know, we're getting a lot of texts in about Nikki Haley and whether or not people would vote for her when if she was on a Trump ticket. I think that would be the worst decision ever. 0994 texted in and kind of said what we're all thinking. Nikki Haley? It would be like Reagan and Bush. They would just try to assassinate Trump so they could put Haley in there. Woo! Spicy take from 0994. But a real fear. You know, it's kind of funny because that's what we all thought about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, that at some point he would step down and they would move Kamala Harris up there. These aren't irrational fears. That's kind of what people think. Now, when we're backstage at AmFest, I got to tell you, some of the more fun conversations, you know, with it, what's happening on main stage is great, but some of the more fun conversations that we get to have is, philosophical stuff backstage. And we were doing a build your own Trump cabinet conversation, me and a bunch of the other guys. And, so we started saying, all right, well, what would you do? How would you build Trump's cabinet? So I said, well, I would do Tucker for VP. And then I thought maybe Vivek for Department of Education Secretary. I feel like that would be a good role for him in a way that could build him towards 2028. Because if you fix the education system, you prove that you really are invested in America's future. I feel like that could be a fantastic role for him. But as far as Nikki Haley goes, I don't think that she has any role in any Trump administration. In fact, I think that she is the old guard of the Republican Party, and I wouldn't want her anywhere near it. And it would give me pause if Trump chose her as a VP. I'm not going to lie to you. It would. Because if you're making mistakes like that before you even get in the White House, that's a mess waiting to happen. Tucker didn't pull any punches, though. He roasted Nikki Haley, talking about is she real or is she a hologram from the billionaire class, and then he went right ahead and roasted Nikki Haley again. Mac, clip 2.
The marvelous thing about Nikki Haley is she gets so much attention on television. I don't have one, but apparently she's on television like every commercial break. When we come back, Nikki Haley. And there's not 27 Republican primary voters who aren't billionaires who support her program. It's insane. She's running on things that are completely irrelevant to Republican primary voters. Just look at the polling. And yet she persists. You don't want to live in a society where every politician has to have a personal billionaire backing his campaign. Where every cultural movement has to because what is that? That's an oligarchy.
That's an oligarchy. Here's Ken Weaver in the latest headlines on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
$9:30 on the dot this Tuesday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Tennessee is suing the world's largest financial asset management company, alleging it puts politics over investor return through its environmental, social, and governance policies. Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti telling WTN's Nashville's Morning News BlackRock is misleading customers by not telling them up front.
And so when we're looking at who's been kind of most out front on this conduct, there are several companies that have been engaged in this, and I'm certainly not saying we're giving anybody a pass. but BlackRock was the right place to start.
Scometti says BlackRock joined ESG coalitions such as the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative and Climate Action 100 Plus, making specific promises toward achieving specific emissions reduction targets. Border security. Texas and immigration rights advocates are at odds after Governor Greg Abbott signed a law yesterday allowing local and state law enforcement to detain and deport suspected illegal aliens. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you into higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
The marvelous thing about Nikki Haley is she gets so much attention on television. I don't have one, but apparently she's on television like every commercial break. When we come back, Nikki Haley. And there's not 27 Republican primary voters who aren't billionaires who support her program. It's insane. She's running on things that are completely irrelevant to Republican primary voters. Just look at the polling. And yet she persists. You don't want to live in a society where every politician has to have a personal billionaire backing his campaign. Where every cultural movement has to because what is that? That's an oligarchy.
Yes, that would be an oligarchy. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Now, last night at AmFest here in Phoenix, where I'm broadcasting live with Turning Point USA, Tucker kind of dodged the VP questions. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He actually at one point said, well, it's like the weather. I have no control. I get that. That's fair. That's fair. I would love for Tucker Carlson to be the VP. He also said that he would advocate against Nikki Haley for VP. If she was on the ticket, he would advocate against it. And I've asked you on the Super Text line, what would you do? Would you be a fan of Nikki Haley being VP? And a lot of texts have come in saying, nope, wouldn't like that one bit. And I don't blame you at all. I'm kind of in the same boat. You know, I said earlier, I gave Trump a pass when he hired a lot of the old guard neocon Republicans in his first term. And I totally get that. I do. But I don't think he can make that same mistake again. And I think that would be the same mistake if he chose Nikki Haley to be VP. Now, Ray texted in, and he said, Chris, I like Tucker, but do you honestly think he would bring any votes to the ticket? No. Tucker would cost us votes. And I disagree completely. I do. And I appreciate the text, Ray, but I think that Tucker is so mainstream. You see the views that he gets on his interviews. You see how well he speaks, how anti-war he is, how pro-free speech he is, how smart he is. I think that he would bring us so many votes. And I think that he hits that younger demographic better than a Trump does. Personally. You know, I can walk around this convention center here at Turning Point USA's AmFest, and I could talk to thousands of people, young, old, black, white. I may find some dissenting opinion when it comes to Trump. I don't think I'm going to find any dissenting opinion when it comes to Tucker. In fact, Tucker's speech last night was the most filled the room had been. It was standing room only when Tucker was giving his speech last night. And I just think that Tucker would draw in those middle-of-the-road voters. He had the number one show on Fox for the longest time. He's so mainstream, and I think that he would pull in the young vote. So I appreciate the text, Ray, but I have to disagree with you. And I think Tucker proves it a lot, and it's one of the reasons is because he speaks so openly and so honestly. You know, last night he was going after American liberals and how the libs are convinced that their cities are better than third world countries. But he's like, but look at their cities. Clip 3, Mac.
Funny thing, if I can just say, about American liberals is they're so convinced that their system is superior, they're like, well, of course, anyone living here in some depressing suburb of Houston on food stamps has a much better life than someone in El Salvador. Well, actually, I've been to El Salvador a lot. It's pretty great. And I'm not convinced it's the worst place to raise your kids right now, to be honest. But more to the point, how is that compassionate? Syria had a civil war, and almost every single doctor in Syria left and went to the West. Oh, a new life for the doctors. Well, what about people who still live in Syria? They don't have any doctors. And if you talk to anyone who runs one of these so-called third world countries, some of which are pretty nice, I got to be honest, they're a lot better than downtown L.A., we're always like, oh, it's so third world. Really? They have none of that in El Salvador. None. There's no one on the street. They have families. It's embarrassing to have your relatives beg.
It is embarrassing to have your relatives beg. But you look at these liberal cities, they only clean them up when Chinese dictators come through. And you don't hear politicians speaking in such an honest way that Tucker does. And I think that he would draw in a lot of people to a ticket because of his honesty and how candid he is and how sincere he is. And I think that we need to get back to that in politics. And I don't think we have it. I don't. And I think that Tucker would be a breath of fresh air as VP. And could you imagine him debating Kamala Harris? Could you? He would run circles around her. It would be worth the price of admission alone for the debates. But before we even get to the VP ticket, Mac, AmFest Tucker 2, they're sitting down, they're doing Timcast IRL live on the stage last night, and electronic voting machines come up. You know, this is a big topic of conversation. You know, are these electronic voting machines safe? And they discussed it on Timcast about the electronic voting machines. Clip 1.
I think that demanding open source or free software voting like code like AGPL3, so at least we can look at the code. It doesn't mean that people can't hack into it, and that might still be an issue, but at least we know that the machines are doing what they're supposed to do, if we're going to use those.
Yeah, I mean, no country serious about democracy would ever use an electronic voting machine, and many don't, because anything digital could be manipulated. Look at Wikipedia. Look at the internet, where entire portions of history are now gone. So I would just demand that we have no electronic voting machines. Why would you even want to worry about that? But I would say,
and I can't help but agree. Electronic voting machines are a risk. And you know what? It's not just Tucker saying it. This is something that the Democrats echoed in the early 2000s. Everybody from Nadler on down the list, that electronic voting machines are a risk. Though now that they're in power, they love the electronic voting machines, and that scares me. It does. But we're not going to be able to change the electronic voting machines before 2024. That's something we're going to have to deal with. So what do we do in the meantime? What can we do now? Well, you know, Charlie brought up the fact that we're doing it with Twitter, and they know it's a threat. Clip 2.
I agree with what you're saying. I agree with what Tucker was saying. Yeah, let's not have electronic voting machines. Open source the code, do whatever you got to do. But there's a practical question of what can we do right now with less than a year in front of us.
The best thing is use X and Twitter because it's obviously a threat to them. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't want to shut it down or go after Elon if it wasn't working. The greatest hope we have in 2024 is we have a sliver of the public square back that we didn't have in 20. And that's why they're going to try to either indict Elon or they're just going to try to crash Twitter through a DDoS attack or some sort of foreign threat. They're going to try to take Twitter down by the summer.
The EU is going after him now.
Yeah,
they just announced this today,
obviously.
Right?
No, people are saying things on Twitter that you're not allowed to say. Okay. And they're going very viral very quickly, and public opinion is changing too rapidly.
And he's right. Charlie is so right there. You're allowed to say things on Twitter that you're not allowed to say anymore. I remember, this is, you know, I'm old enough to remember that people were getting banned for saying learn to code on Twitter. You know, in reference to people losing their jobs, Democrats losing their jobs. You know, there was a big joke, well, learn to code. You know, and you'd say that as a joke back to liberals because they were the ones that originally said that when people were losing their jobs, and you would get banned. I remember on Twitter when you would be banned for saying there's only two genders. Men are men and women are women. You'd be banned. And that is gone. They don't have that control. That scares them. So one of the things that we can do now is spread information as quickly and as fast as we can on Twitter, and hopefully we don't see another situation where the Hunter Biden laptop is suppressed. You know, hopefully we don't see another situation where the leading voices in the movement are silenced and suppressed and shadow banned at rates that we haven't seen before. So we're not going to be able to tackle the electronic voting machines, which, again, Democrats said were a problem. They said that electronic voting machines were a problem before conservatives did. We're not going to get back to paper ballots. But what we can do is mobilize online and spread information as fast and as quickly as possible. And they do know that that's a threat. But when you look around here at AmFest in Phoenix and you see an army of young people, you know, a multi-generational crowd, thousands of people who come to Phoenix, you know, a couple weeks before Christmas to Maricopa County, Arizona, you got to have some hope. And all these people are on Twitter, and all these people are sharing information, and all these people are spreading information as quickly and as fast as possible. That's a good thing. And it scares the system. It does. You know, when we talk about the Tennessee Attorney General suing BlackRock, did anybody really know what BlackRock was a couple years ago, or Vanguard was? I mean, sure, some people who were really dialed in, really keyed in knew. But this story is going to be massive that we're suing BlackRock, and it's going to spread on Twitter. The Biden corruption story is massive, and it's going to spread on Twitter. And of course, they're going to try and attack that. But what we can do is keep sharing information, keep spreading information. That's one of the advantages that we have now. We have the digital public square back. So I have hope. I do. Electronic voting machines or not. And you look at these polls, man. The polls are definitely in our favor. You got young voters under 30 overwhelmingly supporting Trump right now. Overwhelmingly. This is the latest Fox survey poll. Young voters are citing the economy as they head in, and 41% of voters under 30 say they'd vote for Trump in 2024, while only 28% said they'd vote for Biden. That's big. Now, I will say 41% also said they would vote for RFK Jr. So, young people, we do have some more reaching out to do. But when you look at the numbers, Trump being more popular to Biden in the young demographic is big. It is. And this was a poll conducted between December 10th and December 13th. This is recent. We have hope. We have hope. I mean, you look at more polling, only 14% of voters say they've been helped by the Biden economic policies. Only 14%. 78% of the voters say the economy is in bad shape. And that's big for us because at the end of the day, people that don't pay attention to politics do understand that their grocery bill is higher, do understand that their utilities are higher, and whether they like it or not, they know it was better under Trump. So I have hope. We have more audio from Tucker Carlson at AmFest last night. I got a couple guests lined up, but you know what they say about guests. And they're never here until they're in the chair. So hopefully I can get a couple of these guys over here to talk to us about what's been going on this weekend in Phoenix, Arizona. And we'll be back in a couple minutes right here on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
All ears and eyes on Tennessee and a first-of-its-kind lawsuit against corporate ESG policies. Renewable energy sources are approaching a benchmark. Southern border security update. And customers on Play Store will share in a settlement worth hundreds of millions of dollars. These stories and more coming up at 10 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you, Ken Weaver. Miss you guys. I miss hanging out with you and Mac. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I can't wait to see you tomorrow.
You got to get back in time for the real cold weather, Brother Chris.
Is it going to be cold?
Yeah, if you could get back tonight, man, you'd really dig it.
Oh, well, I will be back tonight. Is snow real, Mac?
Yeah, snow is in fact real.
All right, good to know. Hey, speaking of cold cities, do you know how bad crime is in Colorado?
How bad is it?
All right, on Saturday, there was an armed robbery in Commerce City, Colorado, and as these guys are doing their armed robbery, the suspect's getaway car was stolen before the group could make off with what they were robbing.
Oh, wow.
It's like the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other like, you're the criminal, you're the criminal. This is how bad it is in these big cities. Are you kidding?
Wow.
Two of the three people allegedly involved in the initial heist have been arrested, but the guy that stole their car is on the loose.
And where was this in Colorado?
Commerce City, Colorado. Wow. 3 armed and masked individuals robbed the high.
Oh.
And as that was happening, the trio had their getaway car stolen.
Gosh,
Unbelievable.
That's so crazy.
Like, even the criminals are victims of crime in these big blue cities.
They call the police.
It's wild. Yeah. Hey, my getaway car was stolen. It's like calling the police because your drugs were stolen.
Exactly.
Like, what? Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Jeez. I cannot wait to be back in Tennessee, boys. It is. What time is it? Is it 10 o'clock? It's 10 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Here's Ken Weaver and the latest headlines. Hang out with us.
Ten o'clock on the dot this Tuesday morning. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. Tennessee is suing the world's largest financial assets manager over environmental, social, and governance, or ESG policies. State Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti tells WTN's Nashville's Morning News BlackRock is the target, but not the only company, he says, is misleading investors into thinking they've got the customer's best interest in mind rather than a political agenda.
This is so pervasive, it's gotten so big that it's going to take a lot of pressure from people on the financial industry to return us to the bland world where all the financial guys want to do is make money, and the policy gets made by the elected officials.
Skrmetti says BlackRock joined ESG coalitions like Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative, making specific promises toward achieving specific emissions reduction targets. This is relatable. Almost 150 years after it was first used to generate electricity on a mass scale, coal is being supplanted as a major fuel inside U.S. power plants.
The Energy Information Administration predicts that the combined power generated by wind and solar will eclipse coal-based electricity next year. The administration has set a goal of carbon-free power by 2035, but even as renewables overtake old-school coal, they still aren't the most widely used fuel. Natural gas powers the majority of U.S. power plants by a long shot.
As Jim Ryan reporting. Border security update. Texas Governor Greg Abbott setting up an immigration showdown with the federal government. Maria Villarreal's in Fort Worth with more.
Abbott signing a new law Monday, SB 4, which will allow local and state law enforcement in Texas to detain and arrest migrants they suspect crossed into the country illegally. It carries a punishment of up to 6 months in jail, and repeat offenders could face up to 20 years in prison. And it gives judges the ability to deport them back to Mexico.
Yeah, immigration rights organizations say they're already preparing to file a lawsuit. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
For many of us, generators are becoming a must-have household appliance. From unpredictable weather to surprise outages, it's better to be safe than sorry. Generator Supercenter of Nashville offers fast and easy installations with 24/7 service and monitoring to all brands of generators and expert repairs done right. Our mission is to make owning a backup generator simple and easy. Visit your local store today or check us out online. Generator Supercenter of Nashville. We serve all Middle Tennessee.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Chris Hand broadcasting live from Turning Point USA's AmFest 2023. We've been down here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been down here for 5 days. It's been going on for 4 days. It has been an absolute wild time. Like, this is what the Republican Party needs to be doing. Conferences like this. Because it's fun. Like, conservatives can be fun. I know, weird. They've had 4 packed days here. And if you missed any of it, you can watch these speeches again on amfest.com. It's gotten spicy. YouTube strikes have been handed out. And one of the things Charlie said last night, which I hope you do, you can help Turning Point combat this strike. So what happens when you get a strike on YouTube is you usually lose boosting by like 90%. So like you lose 90% of your audience because they don't suggest you in people's feeds. But you can combat that by going and subscribing to videos. By subscribing to the channel. So if you can go subscribe to Turning Point USA's channel, it would help them out, because this is such an important information battle. And I know a lot of people say, YouTube, go join Rumble. But YouTube is where the most people are, and you got to fish where the fish are. It's one of the reasons why I think Trump needs to get back on Twitter. You have to fish where the fish are. So a lot of these big companies are on Rumble. Turning Point's on Rumble, but the audience is on YouTube. So when you get that strike, it does hurt. But we're also sharing information that needs to be shared. So it's like you're balancing this line. It's like you're a tightrope walker, and if you don't do it the right way, you're going to get these strikes. You're going to have your views basically limited by big tech, and we can all kind of step up and fight that by subscribing. So make an extra YouTube account if you have to and subscribe. I did. Everybody's doing it. So go subscribe to Turning Point USA's YouTube channel. You can watch all the speeches from AmFest. It's been absolutely fun being here for 4 days. They had a concert. They had John, Big and Rich were here. It's it's been wild. And I'm joined now by a young man by the name of Josh Alexander. What's going on, Josh?
Not much, you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, thanks for being here. So a lot of people joke and say that I'm Canadian. They say I sound Canadian. Once you hear Josh start talking, you're going to understand that I don't sound Canadian because Josh sounds very Canadian. And you can see him on YouTube in his Save Canada hat. So tell me about your story, Josh. How old are you?
I'm 17 right now.
You're 17, and you basically are an enemy of the Canadian government.
Yeah, at this point, I've been arrested 3 times this year up in Canada. My brother, the same amount, and so I guess you could say that.
What have you been arrested for? Let's start in the beginning. What was your first kind of interaction with the Canadian government that kind of put you in the hot seat?
Yeah, so what would have happened is I was a homeschooled kid. I was raised homeschooled till grade 7, and then I went into the public education system in Canada, and that's when the mandates started to roll around, and I decided to organize student walkouts against mandates, and that spread all across the country. We're doing it in Ontario, BC, Nova Scotia, Alberta, and it was quite the hit, but I kept getting suspended from school and whatnot. So when the mandates finally got withdrawn and we won, I decided to switch schools and just get rid of the hostility with the staff and just finish up my education clean. But that's not what ended up happening. I went to the Catholic school board, and not long into it, a couple female students approached me, and they said that they were concerned that males were using their washrooms and whatnot, and they knew I had been outspoken on other issues, so I might speak about this one. And so that's what I did. And anyways, it ended up getting me kicked out of school, and it became quite the controversial scene in Canada.
So you got kicked out of school because you didn't want boys in women's restrooms?
Yeah, so I addressed the principal about it respectfully. I said, this is obviously a problem, and he refused to even recognize that these students were males that were entering the female washrooms. He said, no, they're girls now. I'm like, that's not how that works, and we had to get into it. I'm like, no, guys got penises, girls don't, and we went into that for a bit, and it always stayed respectful with the principal, but I can't say the same for what happened with some of the other staff. It got pretty heated at some points where teachers and students would just be shouting at me. I'd be getting called a racist, a homophobe, transphobe. We all get the list every now and again.
Yeah, we're all on that list.
Yeah.
So then fast forward, you get involved with the trucker convoy protest. Tell me how you got involved with that and what that was like.
Yeah, so I went to the Freedom Convoy. I would be going to school and then running back to the Freedom Convoy because I was only like an hour away at the time. And that was really a turning point in Canadian politics, in Canada in general. I mean, that really changed a lot of people. It changed the way protesting was done. And only now are we seeing the legal effects that it's had. We got Chris Barber, who's actually here at AmericaFest with us, and Tamara Litch. They're on the trial, and so that's only starting to come out now. Thankfully, I wasn't arrested at that event. I did run into a little bit of trouble, but it wasn't anything serious. I've only now started to get in trouble about a year after the convoy.
So now you're starting to get in trouble with the Canadian government, and I really think it's important to explain what you're in trouble for with the Canadian government. What are they charging you with, and what have you done that they deem is so evil and bad?
Yeah, so I was originally arrested at my high school in front of everybody for returning to class against the principal's direction. Now, that took months to get to that point. I was always respectful of the principal. We tried to work things out properly, but that didn't end up being an option after he denied me an education because I had quoted Mark 10:6 in a classroom, and I'd gotten in a lot of trouble for it. And for those who don't know, it's God created the male and female. And
so you quoted scripture in classroom,
yes.
And that is it's a punishable offense.
Yeah, they said because there was students that identified as trans in that class that it was hateful.
So the Bible is hateful.
Yeah, that's what they were saying. They said it was targeted. I chose that verse because I hated the students around me, and yeah.
So then you're kicked out of school for that. You're arrested for that. When was your next arrest, and what was the offense?
So I actually, only a day later, found myself getting arrested because I was street preaching outside of a drag queen story time. So basically a transvestite goes into a library with a bunch of books. It was actually our National Arts Centre he went into, funded by the Canadian government, the Ontario government. Anyways, before I had ever even gotten in trouble at the school, I had this event planned. We were going to go and we were going to contest the Stray Queen Story Time, me and my crew from Safe Canada, which is our student activism group. But anyways, we go to the Stray Queen Story Hour and we get attacked by like 300 counter-protesters because now it's a pretty big deal that I've been arrested and it's all over the media and everybody's seen it. So I end up getting attacked. My brother gets attacked. Monty Walker, who's one of our best friends, he gets attacked as well. And the police run into the crowd. They grab all of us, throw us into the street with moving traffic. And then they ended up arresting my brother for being in the street when they wouldn't allow us back on the sidewalk. And I was just continually street preaching through the whole thing. And while I was quoting some scripture, they told me that if you don't stop quoting that, you will be arrested. And I was in the middle of John 3:16 when the police came up. They grabbed me and they were trying to cuff me, but I finished the verse before they got that in, and I just had one of those megaphones. And that was my first arrest. They charged me with they charged me with trespassing. I was arrested on a sidewalk, so I don't know how that works. Well, I was actually arrested on a crosswalk when they got me, but and then they also tried to get me with disturbance, and there was one other that I actually can't remember now, but those charges have since been dropped. So that thankfully that's been cleared up. But the police again have not been held accountable for any of that. They just said that it was their mistake and moved on, and forgot that they arrested a minor, drove him out into the middle of nowhere, dropped me off to fend for myself, so that was rather disappointing. But then the most recent arrest would have been in Alberta, actually, which most Americans would know as the freest Canadian province. You'd think there'd be a little bit of hope there, but I ended up going to Calgary, and there was actually a event organized by Liberty Coalition Canada to have students walk out in support of my cause. It was called the I Stand With Josh Alexander rally, and I went to attend this school that was doing it all across the country. They were rallying for me, so I thought, well, I'll go out and visit them, and Artur Pawlowski brought me down, and I was there with his crew. And for those who don't know, he's the pastor that's been arrested 17 times, I believe, for opening his church. And
how dare he?
Yeah, how dare he? Fulfill the Great Commission and do what the Bible commands him to do. Anyways, I was with that crew, and I'm walking down. I went to this rally, and I lasted about 4 minutes before being arrested because a crowd of Antifa and BLM attacked me. And I had my hands in the air while it's happening. They're choking me. They're trying to set me on fire. They're punching me in the face. They're attacking the guys around me as well. And the police run in, and they arrest me. They took me down, and I learned that they wanted to they were arresting me for hate speech, and being involved in a conflict. So anyways, I'm sitting in the paddy wagon, and my phone's in my pocket, and I just feel it blowing up. It's on vibrate, and I guess the story had already hit the news, and the police decided to let me go, but not before interrogating me and trying to figure out which scripture I was using. They wanted to know if any of the Bible verses I had used were in contradiction to their bylaw against with any conflict in regards to the LGBT community. So they're basically saying that I may be charged with hate speech depending on what scriptures I used.
Oh my gosh.
So that did end up being closed. They told me I'd be arrested if I returned to that event. Now, I'd only been there for 4 minutes, and I had a whole pile of Bibles to give out, so I wasn't done. So I did go back, and what ended up happening is, as I was walking back, the crowd saw me again, and I was waiting at a crosswalk to get across. And while I'm doing that, the crowd ran across the road again to berate me, so I didn't actually have to do the act of walking across the street, so they couldn't really arrest me. But I got to walk around. The students all came to me, and we went about, and we had a lot of productive conversations that went on for hours.
So it feels to me like there's a new religion in Canada, a state-sponsored religion, and it's the government.
Exactly, yeah.
And it seems like they're actively trying to demonize Christianity.
Oh yeah, it's their biggest threat, and the reason why is because they recognize that an idea such as Christianity that promotes the nuclear family, the strongest weapon against tyranny, is dangerous, and they want to eliminate that, and they want to get rid of anything that has that includes boldness within its moral guidelines.
Now we're on the air with Josh Alexander, the founding member of Save Canada. He is only 17. You've been arrested multiple times for quoting scripture. The Canadian government has a target on your back. How do you find the strength to keep going when so many others would just say that I'm just going to keep my head down and quiet down?
Well, I think as a young man, as a young Christian, I want to rise above the degeneracy of my generation and the modern church in general. I think that we've all forgotten when Paul said the righteous are as bold as lions. I think quite a scary question that a lot of Christians need to ask themselves is, if the righteous are as bold as lions, can you be righteous but not bold? Because that should be a concerning question for many, because bold Christians don't appear to exist anymore. We just went through the COVID mandates, and Christians refuse to rise. They refuse to stand up, and it's shameful. So I want to be better than that. I want to fulfill the Great Commission. I want to go into those difficult parts of life and give the gospel and be a bold ambassador of Christ.
This is Josh Alexander from Save Canada, 17 years old, being targeted by the Canadian government for basically quoting the Bible. Where can people find you, and how can they support you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to my website, which is savecanada.shop, but I'm also on most social media, mainly my Twitter or X, which is officialjosh_A, and my Instagram's josh.alexander_SafeCanada.
Perfect. Well, Josh, I love what you're doing, man, and you and your youthfulness give me hope for the next generation in a way that not many of this generation does.
Thank you.
So I appreciate what you're doing, and I just want to say thank you. We'll be back with more in a minute. We are live on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. What's up, Andrew?
All ears and eyes on Tennessee and a first-of-its-kind lawsuit against corporate ESG policies. Texas has a new law which immigration rights advocates plan to challenge in the courts. These stories and more coming up at 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you, Ken Weaver. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN. My name is Chris Hand. Again, thank you to Josh Alexander. If you want to find him on social media, go to my Twitter, at Chris Hand on Air. I'm gonna send a thank you to him. That way it's easier for you guys to find him. What an inspirational kid he is, huh? When you're targeted by the government for quoting scripture, and we only had a limited amount of time with him, but we did talk more off air, and it's not just him that's been targeted. His parents have been fired. His brother had been fired because of him speaking out. And we actually have another guest here now. I'm joined by Turning Point USA contributor Stephen Davis.
Oh, yes, sir.
Up,
What's
Steven?
going on, brother? How you doing now?
So, Stephen Davis, I don't know if you guys know, you may know MAGA Hulk. He is a large black man. How tall are you?
6'4".
And how much do you weigh?
Well, I've been losing a lot of weight lately, so I'm about 328, 330.
I mean, you're jacked.
Thank you.
Jacked.
Let's go.
I joke at the office that his arms have stomachs.
Hey!
But I think your story is so interesting, man, because you weren't always a conservative.
Nope. Not at all.
But you were always a Christian.
Yes. Which is it's weird how one calls oneself a Christian, but adhering to progressive ideology is kind of interesting, especially since a lot of within the black community there's a lot of people who typically lean heavy on the race and typically don't like a lot of white people, but yet and still the Bible calls for us to love your neighbor as yourself, right? Which is kind of contradictory if you're blaming white people, disparaging white people based on the color of their skin, blaming them for all your ills and everything like that, but yet and still you're supposed to love your neighbor, but you're hating on your neighbor. It's a confusing thing that happens within the black community, and it's something I had to rectify as time went on.
So how did you kind of wake up to the lies of the left? Because I find your story so fascinating, and I've heard it a couple times.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure that my audience hears it because it's wild.
Yeah. I was a very racist black guy. I didn't like a lot of white people, disparage white people because, they're trying to hold me down, hold me back. Oh, my goodness, they're the enemy. That's oftentimes what's taught within the black community, and now you're getting taught this in colleges and universities and high schools and elementary schools. It's absolutely ridiculous. But for me, I just couldn't reconcile myself with white people, and as time went on, 2017, 2018, I decided to jump into the realm of politics, and as I jumped into that, I started realizing that I was on the wrong side of history, right? And at that time, I was a Trump hater, right? I couldn't stand the guy. Media told me to hate him, so I decided to hate him. And it wasn't until I started doing my research that I realized I was on the wrong side of history. And not only was I on the wrong side of history, the way I was thinking was antithetical to the truth. That it was wrong, it was bitterness, it was anger, and that I needed to make a change. And as I started making that change, I started realizing a lot of things about myself that was not kosher, including my racism. And I started reconciling with that. So, But
the media tells me that black people can't be racist.
Oh, yeah.
So this is blowing my mind.
Power plus prejudice equals racism. So says this newfangled idea of what racism is. See, black people can't be racist because black people don't have the power in America, so they say. So power plus prejudice. So black people can at most be prejudiced, but we can never be racist. See, white people have the power, and they have the prejudice, so they're the only ones who can be racist, so says the left. So it's this newfangled idea that they try to utilize within the realm of CRT, critical race theory, to be able to make it seem like black people can't be racist, white people are the only ones who can be racist, and as a result, we have to be able to vilify white people based on the color of their skin. As Ibram X. Kendi talks about The only way to stop past discrimination is through present discrimination. The only way to fix present discrimination is through future discrimination. So how do you fix the discrimination that happened to black people? By discriminating against white people. That's Ibram X. Kendi's approach, and you see this happening in grand fashion. A lot of people are following his line of his reasoning of, just be racist to those who are racist against you, and here's the thing. There was nobody every white person that I encountered were great to me, right? Yeah. White people, I've had some bad apples here and there, but for the most part, they were great, right? Yeah. So this idea that white people are out to get blacks is absolutely just antithetical to the truth. It's not true. It's this fiction that we put in within our own mind, this fear that we have within our own mind, that we have within the black community, that needs to absolutely change. And we're just making things worse on ourselves by ostracizing ourselves from society. I think it's just counterproductive.
I love it. Can you hang out for a minute?
Oh, let's do it.
All right, cool. Stephen Davis, this is like one of my actual friends at Turning Point USA. This guy, if you ever have a chance to meet him, he is one of the nicest individuals you could ever meet. He's so smart, and he's based in truth, and I love it. So hang out with us. It is 10:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We're going to get to the news, and we'll be back with Stephen Davis, Turning Point USA contributor on Super Talk.
.30 on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Full forecast in 2 minutes. And Tennessee is suing the world's largest financial asset manager, BlackRock, in a first-of-its-kind lawsuit alleging the firm has harmed consumers through its environmental and climate strategy goals, or ESG policies. State Attorney General Jonathan Skermetti telling WTN's Nashville's Morning News.
If investors want to invest in ESG, this is America. They can choose to do that. Companies can sell them products that do that. The key is they have to be honest about it. They got to be transparent about whether a particular investment is being managed in a way that furthers environmental goals or whether it's strictly being managed in a way that furthers return on investment.
Now, the lawsuit seeks injunctive relief, civil penalties, and recoupment of the state's costs. As Congress wrestles with federal immigration policy, Texas has come up with a solution of its own, giving local police the authority to arrest people thought to be in the country illegally. Immigration rights groups vowing to sue, claiming it encourages racial profiling. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you in a higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing in financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN, broadcasting live from Turning Point USA's AmFest. It's day 4 already, and we are so blessed to be down here in Phoenix, Arizona. My name is Chris Hand, joined now by Turning Point USA contributor Stephen Davis, a.k.a. the MAGA Hulk.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how you woke up to the lies of the left, and
yes,
I kind of want to rehash that a little bit because you weren't always a conservative.
Nope.
In fact, you're still in your formative years as a conservative in many ways. As we all are, we develop our opinions.
Absolutely.
Through research and education. And how did your friends and your family react to you waking up to the lies of the left?
You know, my family, they were very supportive. They were very supportive of me. Not all of them disagreed, right?
Okay.
I mean, not all of them agreed. I'll put it like that. And, it was kind of like, you know what, you're our brother. It doesn't matter. You know, do whatever's beneficial for you. And we'll support you in everything that you do. Now, my friends, on the other hand, oh boy. Yeah, those who have been my friends, so-called friends, you know, they turned their back on me in a quick second.
Really?
People I've worked with, people I've worked side by side and we've had good times with and, you know, used to laugh, joke, play, whatnot. All of a sudden, they turned their back on me. They were calling me all kinds of names. Of course, they were calling me names on social media, you know, and kind of like, you know, I never want to see you again. You're one of those, you know.
It seems like it's harder to come out as a conservative nowadays than it is if you were to come out as gay. You know what I mean? Like in the 80s and 90s, it was like harder to come out to your family as gay. Now that's so celebrated, but like if you come out as a conservative, it's like, whoa,
yeah.
Where did we go wrong?
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. That's it. You know, it's the. You know, if you come out as gay at this point in time, you're celebrated. You know, you're put up on a pedestal. You know, everyone's, you know, the confetti rains from the skies and whatnot. But when it comes to you coming out as a conservative, it's a totally different thing now. It's the anger, the vitriol, all because you want to stand upon precepts that your founding fathers stood upon, right? All because you want to stand for America, all because you want to stand for your flag, all because you want to stand for conservative values, right? And you want to get our country back to greatness. All of a sudden, that's considered a bad thing. I think that a lot of people misunderstand what conservatism is really all about. The news media puts on a negative spin on it, and as a result of that, a lot of people just try to shut up and shut down conservatives. So it's incumbent on us for us to get the message out to the American people so that we're trying to do the best for America. We're trying to preserve and conserve a lot of the great things about our nation. It's not about progressivism. It's not about going into this radical ideology. It's all about preserving tradition and getting us back to a traditional mindset. And I wish that we can get people to understand that. I really do.
And I love what you said about how it's about getting the message out, because that's really where you're focused now.
Yes.
Is getting the message out. So tell people what you kind of do, what your role is at Turning Point USA, and how you get that message out.
Oh yes, I love going to college campuses, going to the colleges and high schools and speaking to the kids, trying to speak life into them. My focus more or less is when I go to these college campuses and high schools is to be able to teach them about CRT, critical race theory, the devastating effects it's having on our country, right? The cancer that is CRT that is constantly metastasizing within our higher academia as well as our school, lower education, elementary school. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's in our lower education. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it's in our kindergartens, right? They're teaching all this foolishness and filth. Putting student against student, race against race, people against people, citizen against citizen. This is what they are teaching at such a young age. They're teaching everybody to look at everybody through the lens of race. Look at the world through the lens of race. White people bad, black people good.
It seems like division is the main goal, because if you divide us, then we can't figure out what the real issue is, which is corruption in the highest levels of our government.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah. It's a divide and conquer strategy.
That's it. It's been like this forever. And there was the Bacon Rebellion of 16 76, right? There was a Bacon Rebellion of 1676. At this point in time, this was during slavery, and there was a bunch of white and black slaves at this time. Yes, indeed. There was a bevy of white slaves and black slaves working together and being enslaved together. They would run away together. They would rebel together. They got along famously, white and black slaves at that time. And the powers that be in Virginia were like, you know what, we can't have these rebellions keep cropping up against the powers that be because they're going to take us over. So what do we have to do? We have to separate these black and white slaves because they keep rallying together. So what we're going to do is we're going to slightly elevate the status of the white slaves. We're going to institute this little thing called race and say, because you look like us, you're more favorable in the eyes of everybody. So we're going to elevate your status a little bit. Not enough where you're on our level, but just enough so that the black slaves realize that you are now different, right? So now the black slaves are going to look at the white slaves and say, hey, how is it that you get these little bonuses? And the white slaves are going to look at the black slaves and say, hey, now we are better than you, right? So now the black slaves and the white slaves are going at each other, and now the powers that be can kind of sit back and kind of breathe a little bit. The same thing that's happening right now in America, the same exact thing, the white versus black divide, and it's constantly tearing apart our country. And since this is a focus, we're continually tearing apart our own country with our own vitriol, with our animus and all this sort of thing. So it's absolutely detrimental. We got to understand what the play is here and understand that it is indeed the elites that are trying to tear us down by keeping us at each other's necks.
Man, I thank you for your time. I know you got more interviews to do.
You better
Stephen
believe
Davis,
it.
Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Stephen Davis 1776, as well as YouTube, Stephen Davis 1776 as well.
I love it, man. Thanks for joining us on the Chris Hand Show. I appreciate you, Stephen. This guy is solid. He's a good guy. And we're going to pass the headphones and the microphone now because we're being joined by former ICE director Tom Homan. I mean, Tom Homan just looked at Stephen Davis and said, I can take you. I don't know. I feel like I'd have to put money on Stephen Davis. Me too. Yeah. Former ICE Director Tom Homan is with us now with Border 911. How are you, sir?
Doing all right. How you doing?
I'm good. Tell me about Border 911 and what you guys are doing.
Well, Border 911 is something I started a few months ago. I brought together, I think, the most knowledgeable border security experts in the world. Most of us worked under the Trump administration. You know, I got myself, I spent 34 years on border security. I got Mark Borgen, CBP commissioner under Trump. I got Rodney Scott, a career Border Patrol agent, climbed the ladder to be the national chief of the Border Patrol. I got Derek Maltz, career DEA special ops director. I got Jason Jones, who spent his career with Texas DPS Intel. The man knows more about the criminal cartels in Mexico than any man I've ever met. I got Sarah Carter, over 20 years, investigative reporter on border. All of us except Sarah are cops. We you know, what makes us experts is that we stood on the front line. We wore the uniform. We arrested aliens. We prosecuted criminal cartels. We put people in prison. And most of us on this team actually worked with President Trump to create the most secure border in my lifetime. So when I say we got experts, that means experts, not because we read a book and not because we took college course, or because all these talking heads come out now, they're all experts. I brought two experts together who did the job. So it's a nonprofit, Border 911 nonprofit. What we're trying to do is go across the country and educate the American people on why border security matters. Because people mix up border security with illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is part of the border, but it's bigger than that now, right? So regardless of what your opinion is on illegal immigration, when you cause a crisis this big, it overwhelms the Border Patrol where 70 to 90% of people are pulled off the line. That's when the fentanyl comes across and kills 112,000 Americans. That's when the sex trafficking of women and children hit an all-time high. That's when the known inspector terrorists are going to cross the border because 70 to 90% of agents are not on the line.
Yeah.
So we're trying to convince American people in the next year, when you get to the voting booth, you need to vote for border security. That needs to be number one because border security, national security. And what's happening on our border right now with all the known and suspected terrorists coming through, this is the biggest national security failure since 9/11. We need to fix it.
Do you feel like we're waiting for another shoe to drop in the forms of a terrorist attack because of the border?
Absolutely. Scares the head out of me. I say it all the time. I've never been more concerned about the safety and security of this country right now than I've ever been. And there's a reason why people say, well, how do you know terrorists are crossing the border? Well, they've arrested last year, just on the southern border, 227 people on terrorist watch list. At the same time, 432 on the northern border. We don't even talk about that. Twice as many northern border. And the thing that's scary is we got 1.8 million known galleyways caught on video, drone traffic, sensor traffic. You got to ask yourself, why did 1.8 million people choose to pay more to get away? Why didn't they pay less just to turn themselves in? Because you pay cartels two amounts. One to just turn yourself in, and one to get to Chicago or New York unscathed. Why did 1.8 pay more to get away? Why didn't they want to turn themselves in, get released within 24 hours, get a free plane ticket to the city of their choice, and get work authorization while they fight their case? Why not take advantage of that free giveaway? It's simple. They don't want to be vetted. They don't want to be fingerprinted. Border Patrol's arrested people from 171 different countries. Many of these countries are sponsored by terror. They arrested 659 last year. How many of that 1.8 million came from countries sponsoring terror? If anybody thinks it's zero, then you're a moron. This is a huge national security issue. So, yeah, do I think terrorists cross this border in this administration? Absolutely. Do I know how many? No. But someday we're going to find out, and it's going to be a bad day for America.
I'm with you, and it's scary. When you see actions like Governor Abbott's taking to allow local police, state police, and officials arrest illegal aliens, is that good or is that too little too late in your eyes?
You know, Governor Abbott's done more than anybody in this administration to secure the border. There was a time he could have done more, absolutely. But I'd rather be late than never. So what he's doing is, it's really sad that he has to do the job of the federal government because they advocate the responsibility. But I've said this, even though it took a while to get to this point, with his National Guard and the troopers on the border, and they're arresting people for, trespass, and they turn them on the Border Patrol and they get released, and people say, well, that's a bad thing. But no, not really. Because everybody his troopers arrested and the National Guard taken in custody, at least we're vetting them, at least we're fingerprinting them to make sure we know who they are. Every ounce of fentanyl his trooper sees, there's a hell of a lot less overdose deaths in this country. So Governor Abbott does some great work. It took him a while to get this new legislation, but then again, it's like any other political thing. Legislation takes a while, but I'm glad they got that bill signed this week. And I think it's going to be meaningful. I think he's going to get sued. I think some federal court's going to tell him to stop. But you got to give the guy credit for trying.
Well, it seems like the federal government's stepping in the way every step of the way, whether it's the shipping container border wall in Arizona, whether it's the buoys on the Rio Grande. Why is the federal government stepping in this aspect?
They want open borders. This administration wants open borders. I mean, you got to give President Biden credit. He wanted open borders. He ran on open borders, and at least he's keeping his promise, right? It's terrible for America, but look, people always ask him, why do the Democrats want this? Why? Well, there's no downside in secure border, right? No one wants more illegal drugs or more migrants to die or more non-expected terrorists coming to the country. So what is their game plan? My opinion is, one, they think their future Democratic voters are letting them into the country, right? But we don't even have to get there because when Biden signed 90 executive orders destroying everything we created on the Trump administration, he also overturned the Trump census rule, which means these millions of people they're releasing in sanctuary cities will be counted in the next census. What's that mean? More seats in the House for the Dems. They sold this country out for perpetual power. There's no other reason to do it.
It feels like it's just pure evil what they're doing.
Oh, this is not incompetence. This is not mismanagement. This is by design.
We're with Tom Homan, former ICE director, now with Border 911. Thank you for stopping by and giving me a couple minutes of time. I feel like your expertise is needed. If you could solve the problem in 3 steps, what would you do?
We made a Mexico program. That was a game changer for the Trump administration. And everybody wants to say, well, people can't claim asylum. Yeah, they do. They can still claim asylum. They're just going to Mexico. But knowing that 9 out of 10 people who claim asylum at the border never get relief from U.S. courts, that's not my information. Anybody can go to the immigration court website and look. 9 out of 10 will never get relief from immigration courts because they simply don't qualify. So why we release them? Knowing that 9 out of 10 is going to lose and only 6% leave after they get an order. So that 9 out of 10 that lose, only 6% leave. So President Trump, he said, look, guys, why not keep them in Mexico? So that way the 90% leave, we don't go look for them. And knowing they didn't really qualify, knowing they're just coming here for a better life, and knowing they're not getting released, they stopped coming. Yep. So these families weren't selling everything in their life and giving it to the cartels only to come here and get deported. So people stopped coming, which means what? less people are dying, less women getting sexually assaulted by the cartels, more border patrols around the border, seizing more fentanyl. It was a game changer. Remain in Mexico program, number one. Number two, the third safe country agreements. Third, finish the wall. Those three things are game changers.
Do you feel like the wall has shown some security flaws with how they're able to cut through certain sections of it?
Not really. Look, the wall isn't impenetrable. We can't come up the wall. They just can't penetrate. Look what happened in Israel, for God's sakes. They got a two-wall system. But what's happening, because the border patrol is so overwhelmed, the new wall that's built, the smart wall, you approach it, we know. You dig under it, we know. You cut it, we know. Problem is, with 70 to 90% of agents changing diapers, making baby formula, when someone starts attacking that wall, there's no one able to respond.
That makes sense.
So that's the problem. But the walls aren't meant to be 100% stop people. The walls are meant to slow people down and get Border Patrol to know something's happening at that wall. The best thing about the wall is it's very humanitarian, because the families who can't climb that wall are going to cross to the area where there's not a wall. And hopefully what's going to be there, men and women of the Border Patrol, to take care of any emergency needs, because a lot of these people are in bad shape when they get there. So the wall is inhumane. No, it's not. It funnels the most vulnerable people to an area where there's likely to be Border Patrol agents waiting on them.
Well, hey, I want to thank you for your time and coming by on the Chris Hand Show. Tom Homan, appreciate you guys. Check out Border 911 and this nonprofit. It is doing good work. Thank you so much. It is 10:51 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Comcast Xfinity data breach. New developments about people with links to convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. These stories and more at 11 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Oh, I'm looking forward to hearing your Epstein announcement, Ken Weaver. It is Super Talk 99.7 WTN, live from AmFest. Just want to say thank you again to Turning Point USA contributor Stephen Davis, as well as Tom Homan from Border 911, former ICE director, for stopping by the show. We got more on the way, so hang out with us. It's 11 o'clock on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
$11 o'clock on the dot. I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. Let's check traffic, shall we? Got a crash 24 westbound right before Jefferson Street, the First Street exit. Then 3 lanes blocked, 65 southbound past Vietnam Veterans Boulevard. And then crash recreation left 3 lanes blocked, 24 eastbound between Waldron Road and Sam Ridley Parkway there in Rutherford County. Consumer news you need to know. Comcast Xfinity warning customers of a data breach. Customer information at risk includes users' names and hashed passwords for some. For other customers, it is names, contact information, the last 4 digits of Social Security numbers, birth dates, and secret questions and answers which were exposed. Xfinity says customers need to reset passwords and are strongly encouraged to enable 2-factor authentication to secure accounts. New developments about people with links to convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. More than 170 people, including former employees and victims of Epstein, set to be named in a trove of court documents a Manhattan federal judge has ordered should be unsealed in the coming weeks. These are people listed as Jane Doe and John Doe in the since-settled defamation lawsuit that Epstein accuser Virginia Giuffre brought against the convicted pedophile's madam, Ghislaine Maxwell, back in 2015. Tennessee is suing BlackRock, the world's largest financial asset manager, claiming it's not being truthful when it comes to its environmental, social, and governance, or ESG policies. State Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti telling WTN's Nashville's Morning News the goal is to protect Tennessee consumers from policies that cater more to climate change than their investment return.
BlackRock is an enormous company, and they're no doubt hiring incredibly good lawyers. I've heard some of the people they've lined up against us. It's going to be a fight.
Skrmetti says the lawsuit seeks injunctive relief, civil penalties, and recoupment of the state's costs. That's the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Hey, it's Chris Hand for Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. It is getting cold outside, so it's time to make sure that your heating system has been serviced the best way, the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling way. Now, don't wait for a problem to pop up with your heat. Or maybe you're starting to notice a problem is popping up with your heat. Well, be proactive. Get your unit in tip-top shape. Call Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. Whether you need annual maintenance, repair, or a replacement heating and air system, call who I trust, Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. You're not going to find a better value on replacement systems. Plus, these guys offer up to 12 months, no payment, no interest, with approved credit, and it pays in so many ways to sign up for the annual maintenance on your plumbing, heating, and air systems from Busy Bee. Plus, for added rewards and savings, sign up to be a Beehive member. You get front-of-the-line service in case your heating system goes down so you don't get stuck out in the cold. Plus, thorough annual maintenance on your plumbing, heating, and air systems with no overtime charges, 24/7 service, and 10% off all repairs. Remember, they have convenient Saturday availability for those maintenance calls, and you'll never be left out in the cold. Busy Bee, your Rude Pro partner. For satisfaction guaranteed, call Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. 615-775-7833. That's 615-775-7833 or online, busybeehvac.com.
.04 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. We are broadcasting live from Phoenix, Arizona, Turning Point USA's AmFest. It's the final day of AmFest, and we have had a fantastic time. You know, I heard in Ken Weaver's newscast, lawsuit to release the names. Did I hear that correctly? There's a lot of background noise.
Yeah. That defamation lawsuit, a judge in Manhattan has ordered that those documents be unsealed, and other than the people that the transparency would hurt, it could include releasing 170 names of Jane and John Does in that lawsuit.
Man, let's get those names out. You know, I was at AmFest last night. I was watching Timcast IRL. Tucker Carlson was on, Charlie Kirk was on, and they're doing it live on the stage, and they went around the table and said, who here has been arrested? And they kind of went through everybody and said, okay, so everybody here at this table has done more time than the people on the Epstein client list. It's it's crazy that this is still so silent. And, you know, Marsha Blackburn subpoenaed these records, the flight logs, and one of the people that blocked that was Dick Durbin. And it drove me nuts, and I'm clearly not the only one who looks at Dick Durbin and is disgusted. Last night during his speech, Tucker Carlson brought up Dick Durbin about his point that he wanted illegal aliens, or, you know, what he was trying to do to get illegal aliens to serve in the military. And Tucker Carlson basically roasted Dick Durbin, and this is what that sounded like. Clip one, Mac.
So I am not a person who looks for apocalypse on the horizon. I always think it's going to be 74 and sunny. Just my nature and my upbringing. Oh, 74 and sunny. You're from Newport Beach. Okay, I got it. Anyway, but the evidence unmistakably shows an acceleration in whatever this dark force is in this country, whose only impulse is to destroy. Not to improve or create, but to destroy. And it's all around us. And the only way to stop it is with that moral strength I described. Guns won't stop it. They have more than we do. That's just true. And they're happy to use them. They're happy to use them. And when I hear Senator Dick Durbin, who might be the most evil member of the Senate, and it's quite a tight race for that title, when I hear Senator Dick Durbin say, maybe we should take some of the tens of millions of foreigners who've arrived, all of whom seem to be about 23 and in great shape, and hand them automatic weapons in our military and give them badges and guns in our police departments, I'm wondering, what exactly is that? Oh, you're assembling an army against your own people. That's what you're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. And you know that that's what they're doing. So, whatever, there are hard times ahead. And you can't beat them with force of arms. You can only beat them with the truth, by showing up and standing immobile in the face of their lies and not fearing them. And there's far too little of this going on.
Yeah, and you know what? He nails Dick Durbin. You're assembling an army against your own people. That's what you're doing. And when this originally came up, I said, you know, it gives me Fall of Rome vibes. But it just feels like the government is constantly doing things to step on the citizens' toes. And Tucker talks about that as well. It's like the government doesn't care about us. And this is what he said last night. Clip 2, Mac.
A government that cares about you tries to elevate you, tries to make you stronger, more independent, as you would with your children. Any parent who inculcates dependency in kids is killing the kids. If you're 15 years old, your parents are like, oh, did you have a bad dream? Come sleep in bed with us. If you're 25 and your parents are like, you don't need a job, just live with us. Mom will make you Captain Crunch for breakfast. They're trying to hurt you whether they know it or not. Anyone who tries to make you dependent is trying to hurt you. Anyone who tries to make you weaker does not have your best interests in mind. And anyone who bombards you with ugliness hates you. And we are being bombarded with ugliness, and we don't even notice.
No, we don't notice. But, to his point about the government trying to make you dependent, look at the welfare state. Look at what we've seen since the welfare state has been instituted. They are trying to make people dependent. They're incentivizing fatherless homes. That's what the government does. And they want you dependent on the government because you're easier to control that way. But Tucker asked the question, and it's an important question, why are they doing this? Clip 3.
So why are they doing this? Because they don't consider you human, that's why. It's that simple. You would never treat a fellow human being the way they are treating you. And the last thing I'll say, which I've been thinking about a lot, and this is kind of inchoate, so pardon me if I don't explain it correctly, but I do think we're looking at a very different worldview from the one that we assumed we were looking at. This is not a Western worldview.
No, it's not a Western worldview. In fact, it feels very communistic in what's happening. And, it's felt that way for a while. It just feels like they're more in the open about it now. And the goal, Tucker says, is to overthrow Western civilization. That's the goal, to turn this country into a communist nation, essentially. Clip 4.
The goal is to overthrow Western civilization. What is Western civilization? Anyone Wikipedia that recently? It's Christian civilization. That's what it is. And by the way, if I can just say, as a nod to my fairly ecumenical beliefs, you don't have to be a Christian to live in that civilization, to love it, to uphold it, to benefit from it. But we should not lie about where the civilization comes from because it's based on the precepts of a very specific religion. That's called Christianity. And it's very different from the Eastern view. And that's not an indictment of people who live in the East, many of whom I love, the East of the globe, at all. And a lot of them want to live in a Western civilization. So again, I'm not kind of attacking anybody. I'm just noting that the Western worldview, the Christian worldview, upon which Europe and the United States and the Anglosphere, meaning Canada, above us, and New Zealand and Australia, were founded on these ideas. What are those ideas? Well, the core idea is that the individual matters. The individual has a soul.
It does feel like Christianity's under attack. It does feel like they're trying to overthrow Western civilization. When we talked to Josh Alexander, a 17-year-old from Canada at the top of the show, who's been arrested in Canada for street preaching. He's been arrested in Canada for quoting scripture. How else can you describe it but Christianity's under attack? It's not just a feeling. We can point to specific cases and say in the Western world, Christianity is under attack. A 17-year-old boy who was even younger at the time, arrested for quoting scripture, arrested for street preaching. Christianity is under attack because the government wants to be our God. And Christians say, yeah, hard pass. But Tucker has more to say, and this speech was fantastic. I suggest you watch the whole thing at AmFest.com or go to the Turning Point USA YouTube channel, which received a strike yesterday because it was probably spreading too much truth. So go find it. It's not going to be suggested in your news feed, but go find the Turning Point USA YouTube channel and watch this entire speech because Tucker just hit so many points that just hit home, including the fact that we're being bombarded with ugliness. Clip 5, Mac.
And anyone who bombards you with ugliness hates you. And we are being bombarded with ugliness, and we don't even notice. And what do I mean by that? I mean the physical landscape around us. This is the most beautiful country in the face of the earth, and I can say that with some, I think, certainty, having been to many, many countries. We have the best-looking country. And the way things look really matters. If you raise a child in an isolation room, what happens to the child? He becomes completely disabled. If you love your children, you raise them with lots of visual stimuli and beautiful things, so they will be inquisitive and bright-eyed and cheerful. The uglier you make an environment, the more you oppress the people who live in the environment.
You know, that one really hit home for me. When my daughter was born, she was born in Detroit. And I remember having a conversation with my dad in the hospital. You know, we were in a suburb about 30 miles outside of the city. And he said to me, you know, life looks a lot different if you're born 30 miles away. And that always hit me. And you know, Tucker says the same thing. When if you just have ugliness around you, it's like you can't thrive, essentially. And I think about these kids in these major cities like Detroit, where they have burned out buildings and they have blight in their neighborhood and spray paint on the homes. And how can you visualize success and excelling in life when you wake up every morning and the first thing you see out your window is a burned up house across the street? And this is happening in America. And we are being bombarded with it. If you think about the trash in major cities, they only clean it up when a Chinese dictator comes through. But in San Francisco, the streets are littered with fecal matter from humans, used needles, drug addicts. You think about modern architecture. It has been completely downgraded and made ugly. You look at, you know, there's the meme online about a road made in Rome, and it's, you know, cobblestone road, and it's like still there thousands of years later. But you look at a road in Tennessee, it's like 6 months, tons of potholes. We are being bombarded with this ugliness, and this modernity is terrible. You know, you look at old school London, it's like even the streetlights are gorgeous and beautiful. But they think that we don't notice this kind of stuff. I notice this kind of stuff. You notice this kind of stuff. In Richmond, Virginia, they had the beautiful Monument Ave. And Black Lives Matter comes in and spray paints all the statues, and they take the statues out. You know, oh, they're Civil War guys. You can't have those statues. But what's left is an ugly street with no beauty. You think about Arlington Cemetery, they're taking out a beautiful statue. What's left? Gravestones, as they've removed the reconciliation statue. It's crazy, and it's an absolute attack on the country, and you have to view it this way. And Tucker says to us, you know, last night during his speech, none of this is accidental. None of it. Clip 6, Mac.
And it can't be accidental, because what is beauty? Beauty is truth. The truer something is, the more beautiful it is. The most beautiful things were made by God. Period. The most beautiful things are in no museum. They're nature. They're trees and leaves and grass. They're animals. They're your dog's face. There's no painting in the Louvre that's half as beautiful as your dog's face. That's not a sentimental statement. That's a reflection of fact. And if I'm lying, find one. There isn't one. And all great art is the closest approximation people can get to the things that God made. That's what it is. And the most beautiful thing of all, of course, is people. A person's face. I'd say a woman's face, but opinions may differ. But the human face is the most beautiful thing. So to the extent they deface that, literally deface that, to the extent they make our environment uglier, they're trying to hurt us, and they are serving evil.
And we have to view it as evil. We do. You know, when you think about the mask mandates and stand 6 feet apart from each other, they took away smiles from us in this country for 2 years. It's not accidental. You know, and Tucker makes the case that this is an attack on Western civilization. This is an attack on Christianity. And when you look around and you zoom out, is it hard to not come to the same assumption? You know, when you look at, like, the communist blocs in Soviet Russia, they were ugly, and the people were demoralized. Do you feel like that's happening in America now? Sometimes I feel like that. There are more beautiful places. You know, you go out into the country in Tennessee, and it's beautiful, but it's like when you get out in nature, it's beautiful. You go to downtown Nashville, and there's trash, homelessness, blight. It's ugly. It is. And Nashville may not be the best case because there is a lot of beauty in Nashville. When you think about, the way the Country Music Hall of Fame looks, it's beautiful. Even Bridgestone Arena looks really nice from the outside. Broadway has some beauty to it, and I'll give you that. But on its whole, these major American cities are falling, and the beauty is disappearing. And it's an attack on Western civilization. It is. You can really judge a civilization on how it looks and how clean the community is and how they treat the least amongst us. And you look at all these factors and you think about where we are as a nation. It's an attack on Western civilization. It is. And when I talk to guys like Josh Alexander this morning and I hear his story in Canada, it's like, that's to the north of us. You're being arrested for street preaching to the north of us. That is Western civilization. When you look at Australia and what they did during COVID with the anti-American lockdowns and the COVID quarantine camps, which were essentially concentration camps for the non-complying, that's an attack on Western civilization. And we can find these examples and list them, and it would be a very, very long list. But it's not all doom and gloom here. In fact, the time that I've been able to spend here in Phoenix with Turning Point USA at AmFest has given me a lot of hope. A lot of hope. Because you find a lot of Americans that are thinking the same things you're thinking from all over the country. In fact, a lot of people here from all over the world that are thinking the same way you're thinking. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, enough's enough. And that gives me hope. It's 11:20 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hang out with us. We got more to come from AmFest with Turning Point USA live in Phoenix.
Comcast Xfinity data breach. A judge ordering documents with the names of people with links to convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein be released. And in traffic, we've got a crash recreation blocking the left 3 lanes of 24 eastbound in Rutherford County. That's going to be Smyrna. All of this and more at 11:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Thank you, Ken Weaver. We are broadcasting live from AmFest, Phoenix, Arizona, with Turning Point USA. My name is Chris Hand. Make sure you find me on Twitter and Instagram so you can see some behind-the-scenes stuff from AmFest, at Chris Hand on air. It's been a wild couple of days, and one of my highlights was last night. You know, watching the Tucker Carlson speech was fantastic, but there was another portion where they did Timcast IRL live, and I don't know if you guys watch that show, but it's a live conversation. They do it every night, and I like it because, you know, it's mostly younger guys that are on the show, you know, my age group, in 30s, mid-30s. But Tucker was a guest, as well as Charlie Kirk, and Tucker said something that, again, hits home, talking about the ability of a government at war to use new powers to crush opponents. Clip 1, Mac.
I mean, you see war in terms of its human cost or maybe its geopolitical effect. They see war in terms of their own fortunes and their own power. So the second we're at war, and there's a long history of this in the West, when war broke out in 1940 in England, the government, later run by Winston Churchill, our hero, put the opposition party in prison with their families, where they stayed without charges. And that's been, you know, that's been Epsteined. It's gone as a fact, but that actually happened. So don't underestimate the ability of a government at war to use its new powers to criminally crush its opponents. I mean,
yeah, and I wouldn't underestimate that at all. We see that when it comes to January 6th. We see that when it comes to President Trump and all of his court cases. You know, I think one of the other underrated portions of that clip where he's talking about Winston Churchill jailing his political opponents, how that's been Epstein from the internet. Well, that's exactly why we need a platform like X where free speech can thrive, because these institutions that are beholden to governments are erasing facts from the internet. They're essentially rewriting history, and I think that's something that we need to combat. There was another point in this Timcast IRL I thought was incredible. You know, Tucker was asked about the Crossfire interview with Jon Stewart, where they asked, you know, did you feel embarrassed during, you know, it talked about your positions on the Iraq war, and Tucker was so honest. He says, you know, he's embarrassed about his positions going into the Iraq war, and then he says, you know, I was there when Saddam was captured, and it totally changed his view and what he thought about the Iraq war. Clip 2.
I realized that everything I'd advocated for was a complete lie, that this was a disaster that could only hurt my country, which is the only country I really care about. And by the way, it eliminated the entire Christian population of Iraq, which I guess we're not allowed to say. But if you're a Christian, you should care what happens to Christians globally. And I must say, they do bear the brunt of almost all of our foreign policy. Yep. And no one says that. It's happening now. It happened in Syria. And it's like, shut up! You're not allowed to notice that. Why? I'm a Christian. Mm-hmm. And I care about other Christians. Why wouldn't I? And they do wind up bearing the disproportionate harm in our foreign policy adventures. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? And honestly, I don't know the answer, but it's super evil.
Well, I feel like a large component, and I think you were saying this earlier, if not the component of what the culture war is the destruction of Christianity.
Of course.
Well, yeah, it's
exactly.
It's a destruction of Christianity. There's also a destruction of innocence. Americans, unfortunately, will look at our foreign policy as if it's something entirely removed from our cultural realities and attitudes. But the truth is, we have promoted a callous disregard for human life over the course of decades because abortion was legal nationwide across this country prior to the overturning of Roe. And if you think sending women the message and men the message that they can wage war against their own unborn children does not have effects on the global stage, and that a person who doesn't have to care about the life of their unborn child is supposed to care about children in Gaza or Yemen, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and you know what? There was definitely a theme that Western society is under attack and Christianity is under attack. And he didn't mention there how we send billions to Ukraine and they're locking up Christians. You know, that was that wasn't discussed because, I don't think they left it out on purpose, but just another nugget of truth of something that's happening that we can't avoid. I got more from Tucker Carlson at AmFest. Plus, we were hanging out live in Phoenix, final day of AmFest with Turning Point USA on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
I'm Ken Weaver with your top stories. We've got a 30-minute delay now. If you are eastbound 24, that's because the left 3 lanes are blocked in Smyrna for crash recreation. Also, Comcast Xfinity is warning customers to reset passwords after a data breach, exposing users' names, passwords, names and contact information, last 4 Social Security number digits, birth dates, and secret questions and answers. In addition to resetting passwords, Xfinity strongly suggests enabling 2-step authentication to secure accounts. And a judge has ordered court documents unsealed next month, which could provide the identities of dozens of people linked to convicted child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. The judge is allowing 14 days for these people to appeal that decision. The state of New York will form a committee dedicated to studying reparations for the state's black residents due to a legacy of slavery and racism, according to the governor. That's the latest news. Traffic and weather next. I'm Ken Weaver, WTN News.
A Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA. Which one should we do? A lot of people struggle over this particular decision. And I'll just give you a couple tools to figure out what might be better for you. Think about it this way. Let's say if I had $1,000 that I was thinking about investing, that was income, $1,000 of income. With an IRA, let's say that you're in a 30% tax bracket. Let's say there is such a thing. And you want to put this money in an IRA. You're going to save $300 in taxes. Now, if you go post-tax with like a Roth IRA, this is how much goes into the Roth IRA. Now, let's say that later on down the road, we have this money and it didn't grow at all, just to keep the math really simple. And let's say that at some point in the future, you're in a lower tax bracket, because the way our tax system works is that your first income is taxed at a really low rate, and then you get up into higher rates, 10%, 12%, 22%, and so on and so forth. It gets higher. If you're earning income and you're at that particular tax rate up there, you might want to avoid that tax rate right now and take the income at a later point in time when you're in a lower average tax rate. Now let's say that you're in a 10% bracket down here when you pull the money. How much are you going to pay in taxes? 10% of $1,000 is $100. How much do you get to spend? $900. Well, even though I didn't have growth, I had growth because of the difference between my tax rate here and here. And that's the idea. That's one of the things that we look at. We look at Social Security taxation, income taxation, and a lot of factors that might drive you into higher or lower brackets in the future. If you want to learn more about our approach to investing and financial planning, go to paulwinkler.com and set up a free 15-minute phone call or call 615-851-1950.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. My name is Chris Hand, broadcasting live from Turning Point USA's AmFest. It's the last day, and it's been a wild couple of days. I mean, we've had concerts from Big and Rich. We've had speakers like Tucker Carlson and Vivek Ramaswamy, and it's been really cool. It's been really cool to meet a bunch of people. You know, I've been able to spend some time with Benny Johnson and ALX, and got to meet Brandon Tatum, great guy. And I was joking. It's like the conference has been happening on stage, but the conference backstage with thought leaders in the movement has been the real show. And I'm blessed to be a part of it. And I just want to thank Dan and everybody at Super Talk for giving me the opportunity to come out here and do the show live. And be able to juggle double duties. I want to thank Mac for producing the show as flawlessly as he's been, as we're not on location. And, the whole time Ken Weaver's been delivering fantastic news, as he always does. In fact, I caught the tail end of his last newscast, and I keep doing this. It's a wild day here. The crowds are screaming, and so I'm Van Gogh listening to Ken Weaver's newscast, but I did hear him say a governor is going to set up a commission to consider reparations for slavery. And I went in Max here. He said, he didn't say Lee, did he? He said, no. He said Governor Hochul out of New York. I said, oh, that checks out. Weird.
That makes more sense.
Oh, yeah. All right, I was like, that checks out. So I grabbed the story. It's like, yeah, New York State will create a commission tasked with considering reparations to address the persistent harmful effects of slavery in the state under a bill signed into law by Governor Kathy Hochul today. And to me, I'm just shocked. I feel like the persistent harmful effects that members of the African-American community in New York are feeling are really more persistent from the illegal immigration issues that they have in New York City. I'm going back to a story that I heard from around Thanksgiving, where there were, underprivileged African Americans waiting in line for turkeys on Thanksgiving, and they were competing with illegal aliens. I come to mind with the fact that illegal aliens are competing for jobs with American citizens in New York City now. And it blows my mind that you wouldn't want to get that under control first. But, hey, what do I know, right? I'm just a humble radio DJ. But there is a poll out, speaking of illegal aliens competing for jobs with American citizens, there's a poll that most Americans want businesses prosecuted for hiring illegal aliens. In fact, it's the overwhelming majority of American voters want employers in the United States to be prosecuted for hiring illegal aliens. I don't see Governor Kathy Hochul in New York taking a strong stance against that. This poll, which surveyed about 1,000 people, registered voters, between December 10th and December 13th, found that 64% of Americans want the federal government to penalize and fine employers that hire illegal aliens for U.S. jobs. I say it a lot, the illegal alien crisis that we have in this country hurts the underprivileged communities first. It hurts people that are struggling and dealing with, living at the poverty line or below the poverty line first. And it blows my mind that Kathy Hochul is going to go at reparations before she can go at one of the real problems in New York City. But, Democrats do Democrat things. Should we be really shocked by that? I mean, should we? I'm not. It's like I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. Another governor that's doing more, and when we had Tom Homan on with Border 911, former ICE director, I asked him, is this too little too late? He said, better late than never, and it's Governor Greg Abbott. He signed a bill. We had talked about it as it was being pushed through, but the bill is signed. It's made illegal alien entry from Mexico a state crime. He signed that bill yesterday, and it makes Texas the first state in the union that gives law enforcement officers, local state law enforcement officers, the authority to arrest migrants who enter the state illegally. The measure, SB 4, was signed into law Monday during a ceremony at the border wall in Brownsville, Texas. And the bill as part of a package of measures designed to decrease the flow of migrants entering the state from Mexico. And the Texas legislature passed the bill during two special sessions this fall. Governor Abbott signed the bill, and I say good. That's a governor actually doing something for the people in their state. This reparations thing, it looks good, Governor Kathy Hochul. Might gain you some brownie points with your constituents and the people voting for you, but it's never going to get off the ground. It's like a fake virtue signal. And I'm over the virtue signaling. It's actually ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And it just seems like the people in our government really don't like us. And it's not just liberals. It's rhinos on the other side and neocons. Tucker actually went at the neocons last night during Timcast IRL, and he was kind of calling them out for not being able to admit the Iraq War was wrong. And he's talking about Liz Cheney. He's talking about, all these old school Bush Republicans that won't admit the Iraq War was wrong. Mac, if you can play clip 4.
Sorry, Chris, you're talking AmFest Tucker 3 clip 4?
AmFest Tucker 4, clip 4. I mean, clip 3, I'm sorry.
Okay. Gotcha. Clip 3. Perfect. Here you go.
They won't admit when they're wrong, and that's a tragedy for the country, but it's also a tragedy for them. There's nothing better for you. There's nothing more liberating. There's nothing more joy-inspiring than being able to admit when you're wrong. It frees you from the burden of the mistake that you made. That's totally real. You don't have to be a religious person to believe it. It's the basic precept of AA. It's the basic precept of all true liberation movements begin with you admitting that you're probably not a super great person and you don't have unlimited power. It starts with you being honest about yourself. And if you can't do that, you are in a prison. And that's why they're also fearful. Every word is measured. They're afraid of saying the wrong things. Why? Because they're afraid of being exposed. If you tell the truth, you have no such fear. You're not afraid at all because you're out there. You don't even care. And if you hurt someone's feelings, if you say something stupid, which you will definitely do, you just apologize for it, and it's better. It's like, I don't understand. It's like not a hard concept, and no one in D.C. can do it.
Yeah, humility.
Yeah, humility. But when you think about a governor like Kathy Hochul or a Liz Cheney, that word doesn't come to mind. I don't think Governor Kathy Hochul would be able to admit when she's wrong. And if we can go to AmFest Tucker 5, Mac, when Tucker's talking with the Timcast crew, it's like even the staffer who got caught shooting gay porn in the Senate hearing room doesn't admit he's wrong. He cried homophobia and people attacking him for who he loves on a LinkedIn post. This is the Democrats and this is the rhinos. This is the Uniparty. They won't admit they're wrong. They're better than us. And this is the Timcast crew talking about that staffer last night.
We've not only have heard these stories of Epstein, the Lolita Express. Madison Cawthorn made some allegations.
Madison Cawthorn was right.
Was right, because we all saw, as much as you probably didn't want to, that video out of the Senate, was it the Hart Building hearing room floor, which was very disturbing, and I do hope they decontaminate that building. I mean that sincerely.
Well, he should be arrested. What he did was worse than what 99.9% of people on January 6th did. And he should be arrested and put in federal prison.
I think it's worse than what 100 did.
Well, I'm not beating a police officer. There's a couple people who did, but yeah.
Well, it is a desecration of the space. I mean, most January 6th people, I've interviewed a lot of them, as you have, and they're all, they were there because they believe in the system, because they all had pocket constitutions. They thought it was real, and they were so shocked to see their election stolen, which obviously it was, and that they marched on the Capitol. But they were there to uphold the system, and some did it imperfectly, and some got out of hand, of course. But this guy is there to degrade it, to defile it on purpose. Like, there's no reason to do that in a hearing room, and to post it on the internet. Like,
and it's so true. I'm old enough to remember Tipper Gore fighting against degeneracy, and getting the parental advisory stickers on CDs, and then having to hide those from my parents, but. It's like there's been a monumental shift in these parties recently, and it seems like the Democrats are pro-degeneracy. But there's been a shift in the conservatives as well. The old school conservative guard loves sending money to Ukraine. They love getting entangled in foreign wars. And Charlie Kirk posed a question to Tucker last night about the shift amongst conservatives. Clip 2.
You're sitting in a conservative event that is applauding for something. This has all been realigned. It's all changed. That an event like this that would have been predominantly conservative would have 20 years ago been totally on team neoliberal, and every thinker would have, maybe there might have been a little bit contrarians here. And Tucker, what do you make of that? That all of a sudden the home of not just America First, but skepticism about these foreign wars and adventures now lives in the conservative movement?
Well, I think of course, it's mostly Trump who did that. And I was just the pivotal moment in the last election, in the 2016 election, that changed my view of everything was the night of the debate in Greenville, South Carolina, when Trump said, that we didn't get anything out of the Iraq War. It was a mistake. And I remember all the dumbos on television. I mean, covering politics is the easiest thing you could ever cover, right? And so these are mouth breathers. These are low IQ people. And they immediately check the notes. Oh, South Carolina is the highest military population per capita of any state. And so they all look at, oh, he said that in South Carolina. He criticized the Iraq War. He's going to get creamed in the primary. And I thought the people I know, having been in Iraq and knowing a lot of people who served there, the people who are maddest about the Iraq War, the people whose lives were disrupted or ended or severely injured by that war. And of course, he won. And it was at that moment, he won the South Carolina primary, it was at that moment that they decided, Bill Kristol and the rest of the ghouls, who were trying to think about how to subvert this campaign and draw its energy for their own dark ends, they decided, we have to stop him, and that's when the realignment happened on the left, where Liz Cheney and Bill Kristol and all these people whose core problem is they could never admit that the great adventure of their life, the Iraq War, was wrong. They could never admit it. And if they would just admitted it, Liz Cheney has lived with this burden, and she's obviously a bloodthirsty freak, but one of the reasons that she is a bloodthirsty freak is that she's never been able to be honest about her own complicity in this crime. And if she would be totally free of all that. And she'd be like a normal human being who her husband could love again. And it would just be all good.
It's so true. And there has been a realignment. Whether people want to, be dragged kicking and screaming or bury their feet in the sand and not move, the party is shifting whether they like it or not. And then you look at somebody like Nikki Haley, who's propped up by the donor class. She is everything that is wrong with the Republican Party as it stands, in my opinion. She's so fake. And if we can skip ahead to clip 4, Mac, Tucker Carlson brings up the fact on if he would vote for a Trump ticket if he chose Nikki Haley as a VP. Clip 4.
Can I just ask a question, since you all are so on the internet and I'm not that much? You really get the sense that Ron DeSantis, who I liked as governor.
Sorry, this is the wrong one. Go to the
people who represent.
Sorry about that. My fault. This clip before is about Nikki Haley.
Someone asked me, would you vote for Trump if he chose Nikki as VP? And
would you guys vote for Trump?
Well,
that's the question that I asked you specifically.
Well, I would not only not vote for that ticket, I would advocate against it as strongly as I could.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's just poison. Here's someone who's actively opposed to the interests of the country I grew up in, who endorsed the BLM riots, and who is not only is not left, but is neoliberal in the darkest, most, speaking of nihilistic way, and has no real popular support. Is a creature of the oligarchs. So yeah, that would be reason to oppose the ticket.
He said she's a creature of the oligarchs and she has no real support. Oh, she's surging. She's surging at 4%, 6%. But she's propped up by elite donors. And that's when Vivek Ramaswamy goes after her. He's booed at the debate because the people in that front row are the donor class. They paid the $5,000 or whatever, and they're also financing Nikki Haley's campaign. But Tucker also called out DeSantis' campaign, which is the next clip, Mac, and how poorly it's been run.
Can I just ask a question, since you all are so on the internet and I'm not that much? You really get the sense that Ron DeSantis, who I liked as governor, the people who represent him online are the nastiest, the stupidest, and the most zero-sum people I've ever seen in my life. And I don't think that reflects him, but it's this is kind of small ball. And by the way, these purported conservatives, Ron DeSantis changed his view, and I like him, okay? I think he's been a good governor. I just want to be clear about that. I know him personally. I like him. But his donor, Ken Griffin, told him to change his view on Ukraine from it's a regional conflict we shouldn't get involved in to it's a super important thing, we should send more money. One donor got him to change his view, and all these so-called conservatives are supporting that like it's the most important thing ever. Like, who are these people and what is their problem? Like, what is going on with them?
It does reflect on Ron, because Ron should have fired the people running his campaign a long time ago. Look, I respect that he wanted to launch his campaign on X, on Twitter Spaces at the time, and it failed miserably. This is a mistake. And now you've got, look, I know a lot of people groan, but a lot of people laugh. The high heels, boots scandal. I mean, who's giving this guy advice, and why does he keep taking it? Because I will say it politically and policy-wise, we love Ron DeSantis. Yeah. He's done an amazing job.
I agree.
But his campaign is a train wreck.
Yeah.
And how many times have we said, Mac, if he had just leaned into the joke about the boot gate, it would have been over and done with so quickly.
Yeah, show some humility. Laugh at yourself.
Laugh at yourself. But the people that run his campaign can't let him laugh at himself, and the people that run his campaign don't really help him in any way. They hurt him every step of the way. And real quick, we did Nikki Haley, we did DeSantis. Let's hear what Tucker Carlson thinks of Vivek Ramaswamy.
But the case, I kind of like Vivek. I think he's one of those people who everyone beats up on Vivek for he's a phony and all this stuff. I don't know. I've covered a lot of campaigns going back to 1992, and I've noticed this thing in many candidates, and I notice it in him. The process of running for president and speaking 3 times a day and having people throw hostile questions in your face causes you to change. They all change during these campaigns, like for real, inside. And I feel like Vivek's positions have gotten much more sincere since the beginning of this. Like I watch him with Nikki Haley, and I'm like, this is a guy who's very offended by her views, like for real. He's not attacking her because she's a woman. He's attacking her because he actually thinks her views are terrible for the country he lives in. And I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's Chris Hand wrapping up here in Phoenix, Arizona as AmFest 2023 comes to a close today. It has been a wild 4 days, and I cannot wait to get back to Nashville, hopping on a plane this afternoon, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Big thanks to all the guests that stopped by today, including Josh Alexander with Save Canada, including Stephen Davis, Tom Homan, and a big thanks to Mac Morey for producing while we've been on location. He's done a great job, and we'll see you guys tomorrow. It's Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. The first woman on the Supreme Court remembered at a Washington funeral today, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. President Biden.
How she embodied such attributes under such pressure and scrutiny helped empower generations of women in every part of American life, including the court itself, helping to open doors, secure freedoms.
The O'Connor funeral at Washington's National Cathedral. There have been at least 2 more missile and drone attacks on commercial ships in the Mideast this week, examples of the need for the newly announced multi-nation military response operation put together partly by U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who is in the region.
It's about as busy as it gets in the region here. But this just tells you that this is a critical region.
The big weekend into Monday's storm is over, but it dumped so much rain. The threat of damaging flooding lingers across the Northeast. In New Jersey, ABC's Anthony Johnson.
The rivers are filled to the brim, and so they're spilling over everywhere in this area, particularly in this neighborhood, but all along the river basins. We're having these kinds of problems with flooding today, and this will probably last for a couple of days for many of these communities.
Hopeful and careful about a big improvement this holiday travel season, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg at Washington's Reagan National Airport.
I don't want to jinx us, but so far, 2023 has seen the lowest cancellation rate in the last 5 years, which translates to more people getting to where they needed to be as expected.
The Transportation Secretary there, a federal judge in New York, has ordered a vast unsealing of court documents next month that will make public the names of many of the convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein's associates. He died behind bars in what was ruled a suicide. You're listening to ABC News.